Welcome to another chapter of On the Brink. I'm Rosemary Armeo. I'm one of us on the brink, but actually, I think right now all of us are. This is an unusual episode. I have two people who are kind of going to be hidden tonight. I'm not going to give you pictures of them, I'm not going to give you their full names, but they are both teachers. One is my son. You've actually met him before. Some of you who are faithful listeners. This is Mike. He has been a teacher for now. This is what, your 11th year, Mike, right?
Correct, 11th
Hard,
year.
hard for me to remember because I remember when you were in seventh and eighth grade, and it seems impossible that it's that far along. And our other teacher is Mary, who works in the greater Capital District region. We're not going to identify her school district. And the reason I have these two people on is that schools, like the media, get blamed for everything. If people don't vote, if they vote the wrong way for what you think, if people don't react the way you want them, you blame the schools. Violence is the schools. It's just like the media. Because everybody reads newspapers, everyone can critique it. Everybody went to school, so they can tell you what's wrong with schools. And oddly, we never talk to the people on the front line, and those are the teachers. They are actually not really allowed to speak freely. When I was an editor in the newspapers, I would always grant anonymity to teachers who talked to us because I knew they could get into trouble with principals. Do you feel constricted at all by that? Start with you, Mike.
Obviously I teach civics. You're dealing with people's kids. So, especially with civics, I have to be very careful, especially in the area that I teach in. We're pretty diverse, but my goal is I want you to know how the government works. I want you to know the nuts and bolts. I don't want to dive into the, CNN, Fox News. Students don't know who I vote for. But yeah, of course, there's certain things we can't post on social media. There's certain opinions that we have to be careful, who we share it with. And I bet it's pretty similar with, it's similar with other jobs. It comes with part of the detail. So, yeah, I feel it. Do I feel like it's a deal breaker? No, because you can all like have podcasts, people have Facebook messages, you can communicate, but you do have to do it without your name on it. And if you
Right.
get doxxed, then there's a chance that there's
You'll
repercussions.
you'll pay a penalty. I teach at the college level, and I always begin every class with saying to my students, I'm a never Trumper. That's going to come out. I can't talk about the media without talking about Trump. So if that makes you uncomfortable, you have to leave. You don't have to think the same way, but if it makes you uncomfortable, leave. You don't have the same academic freedom that I do. Mary, how about you? How do you deal with this sort of anonymity imposed on you by the realities of your job?
Yeah, well, I guess, when I was a younger teacher, I was much less careful. But especially in this age, I am very careful to not, you know, divulge my opinions, right? What I really do, how I deal with things is I really just focus on describing. So like we'll go over I try to get them caught up with like 50 years of history so they really understand our current political situation. So, I'll go into here's what the Dems think, here's what the Republicans think, and we do it blow by blow on each issue.
Mhm.
Abortion, from 30 years ago, how have things evolved? So, and I teach them about the political spectrum, but I don't insert my own opinions. So, I
Mhm.
just try to give an accurate portrayal. Now, of course, nobody's absolutely objective, right?
Right.
The materials that I choose as a teacher, are not good because, I, God forbid if I sit there and use a textbook. I have never used a textbook teaching. That's the way you kill uh, lessons, especially civics. I mean, I
Enthusiasm,
might
right.
consult a textbook, but I use, and especially, I'm teaching high school students who are going to be soon going out into the world, and I really try to use authentic media sources. And we do a lot lately, the last several years, we've been doing a lot on media literacy. Um, for example, I show them a Mark Zuckerberg deep fake. We go down to the library to learn how to check sources and I like ground news because they can easily, and they all get their news online. So, but with ground news, they can easily see the left, right, and center view. So
As,
that's kind of how I handle it.
mhm.
I
As
try
you,
to make them aware
I'm
of
sorry,
all
I was going to
perspectives. And
interrupt
in
1 minute.
fact, the very
Mary, I was going to interrupt here for 1 minute to explain something I haven't told my audience, which is that both of you are social science or civics. The wording
Social
changes, but
studies.
it's social studies teachers. Mary is in her like 25th year of teaching, so you have some experience at this. And I want to know specifically, do you take the blame as teachers for what many people see as an uneducated electorate these days?
No, I don't get it personally. I think people just like with the media, it's like, you don't like how a certain story was told, and it's like, oh, look at what the media does. And I think teaching's a lot like that. I don't, luckily, knock on wood, I have not had parents upset at me for the way or what I teach. Now, that said, the reading scores are low. The math scores are low. We are not doing something right as I mean, keep this in mind too, is people think education is like one thing. This is a state power. So like every state's different, every district in every state's different. So, you're just going to have it where the district that you work in the specific state that you are, you're going to have to adapt to those norms. And I don't think it's an end game. I don't think it's hard. It is something that I'm aware of. And again, I think it's something that, you're lucky enough to be a professor where you can just be like straight up like, hey, I don't like Trump.
Right.
You can't do that if you're actually a reporter for, an
No,
accredited place. So
no,
that
you cannot.
it's just very similar, right? And
Hmm.
kind of what Mary was saying is like my goal is not to pick a side or place a value on anyone's side. I play devil's advocate. So if I have students and they're usually Trump supporters that are vocal, I don't go and say like, oh, how dare you, da, 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 da. Like I'll be like, okay, well, what are your thoughts on? And I'll bring up an actual topic, right? So in terms of media, I have a current events section. It's like my students like all my stuff that's not civics, right? And I do current events, and what I do is there's any given day there's 3 or 4 major stories. I'll pick actual like websites of generic, reliable. Some are if it's not a political topic, I'm not worried about using an ABC, CBS, NBC. If it's political, I like to use something that's international, like BBC, or the Independent, something that's where it's or like there's a really good French news channel I like. So this is how I approach it.
Hmm.
And again, you're working with because especially in the media, and it probably was before it was like highlighted. A lot of people probably think that teachers are putting some liberal woke bias, sending these just kids these ideas. So you do have to be wary of that. You know.
Okay. Mike, as you can tell, teaches at the middle school level. Mary, who's actually a little bit more experienced than Mike, is at the high school level. Is it different for you, Mary? Do you approach your
Well, I think
students?
just
Go
as
ahead.
social studies teachers in general, or teaching social studies, I feel it is my responsibility as a social studies teacher to cover the most pressing controversial issues. Okay. But I've learned from experience that the most effective way to do that is very calmly
Hmm.
and through kind of laid back discussion. And I think it's been pretty effective. I've had students out of the blue say, "Hey, I really enjoy your class." So and in terms of current events and teaching the principles of government, I like to use current events to do that. I use a lot of Supreme Court cases. Um, so because it's
Well,
hard,
what are the elements of government that you both have to teach? What should your students leave your class knowing about? Mary first.
okay, well, obviously, and so I just started, a new pig class today.
What's
Um,
pig? What is pig?
Pig is participation in government. That is what many New York State students take for
Hmm.
it for what you would call civics. Um, And so, basics, and I always do kind of a little mini assessment. Well, how much have they learned from US History 11, which they take, right, about the basics of government? And I don't know, teaching these concepts of the checks and balances system. I mean, they had a hard time, and they all passed the regents, but they had a hard time, talking about I said, what are the three branches of government? They had a hard time with that.
Oof.
Yes. Okay. Now, rest assured, they're going to know this before they leave my class. But I think part of the problem is they get so bored to death by the way the regents often
Set
go.
up. I want to talk about teaching to the test, but Mike, do you agree with that? Are these things that you want your students to know when they leave your classroom about government?
At my level, it's citizenship, what it means to be a citizen, how you become one, Constitution, the basics of the Constitution, what's the preamble, what's the Bill of Rights, what are the articles that establishes the branches. Then we could talk about each branch. Then it's people in politics, how you get involved. Then it's state, local, which is very similar. It's just different positions.
The levels of government.
Yeah, but you can all tie it together. And then the last one's economics, which is, ironically, for eighth graders, they already know most of the stuff. They're already consumers, they're already buying. So those are the main things we go over. Essentially, what I want students to do is, especially like in Unit 6, very generic. We don't, I'll talk about abortion with, current events, but when I'm having students take their own ideological charting, it's 10 safe issues, and they can kind of figure out where they fit on the spectrum. And what I love about that session is that, and this is how I don't tell who I like, who I voted for. I say I'm a moderate. And what that activity shows is that most students, I'll get them up, they'll know their score, and most of them will be in the middle of the class, because that's my spectrum, my scale. And that just shows you, hey, you're hearing all this stuff because they're getting it from TikTok now. But it's partisan, and the point is hey, look, most Americans are moderate. This is how we think. So when you're hearing all these loud voices,
and that's why we're a stable country, because most Americans are moderate. It's the great middle.
Yeah. And I guess the one other big thing, and I say I'm not a fan of criminals, but dude, one of the most important things you'll learn in my class is, if you ever get detained or arrested, keep your mouth shut, ask for a parent because you're a minor, and then ask for a lawyer, because once you do not answer a question. And I'm dude, that's straight up the most important thing I'm going to talk about this year is that, right?
Absolutely. And
Mary, jump in here, Mary. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got to jump in here because, I have started teaching with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that. I've started, really, we go over how they should behave with the police, never run, all of those things. We do their search and seizure rights. They're different if they're in a car, you're on the street, or in the house. But we do a lot with that.
That's interesting. I never learned that when I went to school. Yeah, I never learned that when I went to school. It's very interesting. You have to count this
really,
part
I've
of the
inserted
curriculum.
it because of the danger, that's out there.
How about parents? Do they demand that you either cover something more or not cover anything at all? Do you hear from parents as much as we in the media seem to think you do?
It totally depends on, every year you're going to get 100 or so new kids. So that's 200 new parents. I've only had a parent upset at me because I started out with brain teasers. I'll have picture of the day, which is an excuse to talk about some historical important picture or historical event they don't know anything about. Most of my kids don't know who Malcolm X is. And I'm well, this is a teachable moment, right? And then I do the current events, and then we go in the civics curriculum, and I like to try to tie it all together, right? I just lost my train of thought. What was
we're talking about parents getting involved in what you want you to teach or not.
One of my pictures of the day was Waco, Texas. So, I talk about Waco. I have a very safe history channel, 4-minute, 5-minute, the before, the during, the after. And I had a mom upset because, that was a little too much for her daughter. So then I was from then on, I'm listen, whenever I go over something, and most of it's safe, right? I feel like I could do it if there's a principal in the room, but I'll give a heads up, like, hey, we're going to be talking about a school shooting and current events. If that's going to mess with you, I'm not here to trigger you. I'm here to like inform you. So I'll be like, hey, go take 5 minute break, right? But most of these kids are like, like I want to see it, like, and that's the key for
Especially
all.
if you tell them they can't, right?
Yeah, and the key for all education is, dude, how do you make this stuff? I love civics, I love government, I love history. These kids don't. How do I make it relatable? So that's the constant, like, and I've gotten 11 years. I'm sure you're 25 years. You can do it better than me, but I'm constantly looking for like what's going on in these kids' lives and how can I relate it to this content.
So
And
let me. Oh, go ahead. I want to get Mary.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm
Sorry.
sorry,
and,
Mike.
and here's the thing. Here's something that I should have said at the beginning. It's my students who have taught me how to teach. That's how I learned to teach. Okay. And you need to pay attention to your audience, right? And if you don't touch them and don't build a relationship with them, whatever class you're teaching, you're not going to be effective. Yeah.
But back to the parent question, I've had it where other teachers were called out. They show like a CNN clip and a mom got upset. So then you have the whole, like, everyone gets in a room, admin, counselors, teachers, parents, and usually your admins, if you haven't crossed the line, your admin's probably going to back you. And if your admin doesn't back you, then it's probably time to go to another school, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're just trying to present information to the students that's going to better them, you're going to have some parents that are upset about that, right? And if they're going to go and take it to admin, then you're going to have that meeting. And if you haven't done anything wrong, it's happened to 2 teachers in my time, and the admin's been like, don't worry about it.
Are there any topics, though, that either of you just completely stay away from? And maybe it's, I don't know, trans rights right now. Do you just stay away from that at the middle school?
I have I point of pride, now if I could get called on it, but I believe I have a little transgender flag in my classroom because I feel that this is a human issue. Right. I want to make my trans students feel safe. Okay. And I will push back if I have, I had last year in my PIG class, I had students who really didn't understand some basic things. So we will read an article, explaining some basic things. And I suppose that's risky, but I'm not going to sit by and not address things when I feel that people can be hurt, I feel that that's, again, as a social studies teacher, you do need to address real issues, or why be a teacher, but that doesn't mean that I have to pontificate or anything like that. But it's more about, well, here, are you aware of these facts? And then hopefully they'll have a better perspective, or a more open perspective.
How about you? Go ahead.
At high school level, you probably have kids that are already politically active. Like I have some in middle school that are engaged, active, but most of these kids, they're not watching this news. They're not engaged. Some of them didn't even know there was an election going on. So I don't take that for granted. It's like, I have a clean canvas. Here's how government works. And then it's like, if you do have an issue comes up, like with an anti-trans, it's like, well, okay, you're about small government. You think the government's sad of our lives. Well, how do you think about them with this vulnerable minority? Do you think the government should be taking away rights or restricting rights? And then instead of being like, you're wrong, like that starts a conversation. Then
if you say they're wrong, that shuts them down. You're not effective as a teacher.
You're going to get defensive. It's like you ask open-ended questions. I want you to think about this. And half the time you're going to be like, oh, and this is what I love. It's like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. And you're like, sweet. That's exactly, like, you don't win arguments.
Yeah. There's people who argue on, who debate on social media could go by some of these same rules, and it would be a big improvement. Do either of you condone book banning or limiting in any way? And I know it's different levels. It's different in middle school and high school. So Mary, let me start with you. Should any
Well,
books be banned at the high school level?
okay, getting back, I never answered your question about how I deal with parents. I
Yeah.
have
Okay.
syllabi, okay? So which I send home to each and every parent. So they look at the topics that we're going to cover, and I make no bones about the fact that as a responsible social studies teacher teaching at the level I teach, we are going to be covering controversial subjects. I say straight up, like I started all my classes today, guys, I'm going to be talking about race, okay? One of the first homework assignments is on rape. So the thing is, though, I believe parents have a right to know ahead of time. If they want to pull their child, if their child doesn't want to be in the classroom for that situation, for whatever reason, I believe they have a right to not be in my classroom. But I let them know ahead of time, and they literally sign off on it for that.
Have you ever had a parent actually pull out a child?
Yes, many moons ago.
What was the topic?
Uh, well, let's see, what was the topic? It was well, this young, I can't really get too specific here, but the whole family basically believed that being the theory of evolution was bunk. And it
Evolution.
wasn't just from my class, it was from science class.
Right.
The student had to be excused,
Right.
and it was
religious issues too on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the student was a very sweet person, but there was such fear there, and I was very upset about it. If you go back into the history books, that whole issue, there's tons of censorship of teachers around that, the Scopes trial and all of that.
Of course. Yeah, that's kind of an American tradition.
Yes.
I want to let in listeners who may just be tuning in now. You are listening to Mike and Mary. Yes, very mysterious. We're only going by first names because these two are teachers. Mike at the middle school level and Mary at the high school level. And we are talking to them about some of the hottest issues of the day. And they are all things, amazingly enough, that we rarely hear teachers themselves talk about. We hear your bosses talk about it and politicians and parents, but not you guys. So Mike, let me let you jump back in here. Mike is a middle school teacher in Virginia. And what do you think? Book banning, book limiting, setting an age limit on any? Are you in favor of that?
I'm for it, but for a different reason. What's the one way you can get a middle school kid to read a book?
Tell them not to.
Ban it, and then they'll read it. So for that reason, I'm for it.
Margaret
Atwood,
the writer, always said, "Ban my books, my sales go up."
Yeah. Exactly.
Dude, it's just ridiculous. Now, I mean, sure, there's at the high school level, there might be some books that are a little salacious, but it's like, dude, these kids they have the internet. So reading some passages in a book that's got a bigger meaning, it's just like, why are we fighting over this? Like, kids, we should be happy that they're even reading. So again, these book bans, these are all the issues that you bring up are just a continuation of stuff that's been around forever. And there's times when you're going to ban books, and it's like, good luck doing that, because you're not saving anybody.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt,
Also,
Mike. I'll come back to you in 1 minute, Mary. I want to follow through on Mike. I know you were raised, Mike, with no censorship. You were allowed to read anything, watch anything you wanted. Were you harmed in any way by this? What is what is the worst thing that can happen if a kid reads a book that he or she is, quote, not ready for?
Listen, these are parents that are trying to protect their kids from things I'm not entirely sure they can protect you from. So these are the same parents that have probably unlimited access to the internet for these kids, right? So it's like, as we're sitting here complaining about TikTok, it's like, well, dude, this new Chinese AI just came out. Like, what?
Right.
We're worried about this little issue. It's like, well, what about
this big giant thing? Mary, let us give you a chance now.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that also I'm really against whitewashing literature. So I really believe that you read Huck Finn the way it was written, and you address whatever.
It uses the N word.
Read the primary sources. You don't. I mean, yeah, and you're not giving kids enough credit either. by doing
Oh,
that.
that's a really good point. Do either of you, to switch topics, pack heat when you teach school?
No, dude, I have a gun. I just went shooting a couple of weeks ago. I love shooting. Should I have a loaded gun on me at work as a teacher? Hell no. I didn't do active like shooter drills. Dude, my job is this. If I'm in a school and there's an active shooter, it's to make my room as safe as possible. I have big cabinets next to my two doors, right? I got like windows, so it's like the whole deal is like hide or stay put or run. I got all those options. I think about these, I deep dive down school shooters. Like I was just deep diving down Parkland and how that guy pulled that off. So like,
So you study school shootings as a kind of way to figure out a protection if it happened to you?
Just like
Wow.
Barry was saying, nothing like if it's a current event, dude, it's good. It's like I'm gonna be careful with it. I'm gonna pick a good resource so you can't be like I'm this or that. But dude, these are real topics, and school shootings, it happens every year, multiple
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
every year. And it's like some
Yeah.
are really bad, and you have to talk about it. And it's like
Yeah. But
this is
I
part of the
didn't
problem.
realize that you actually studied it to figure out what you might do if you're in that
Well, I wouldn't
situation.
say I was like with a pet, like a pen and a pad, like right in the butt. It's like, dude, like
Yeah.
one school shooting happens and you hear about this other and you're like, oh man, I forgot about that one. And then you dive down because now there's all this research on it because it happened years ago. And you're like, dude, I had no idea.
Mary, how
So
about you? Do
yeah,
you have worries about this in your
I've done a
yard?
lot of research too on it. I'm no, I'm not worried. I will jump in front of the kids and I will throw desks at them. There
Mhm.
is a lot of what shall we say? There may be new guidance coming out in terms of because how you should handle if somebody actually breaches your room with a gun. I remember this was the very first time we did one of these lockdown drills. I actually, because nobody knew what they were doing, I actually had all the desks stacked up, multi-layers. There's no way they would have gotten to us. But no, in all seriousness, I'm aware of things like don't leave a door open, right? Uvalde, right? An
Yep.
open
Yep.
door. But at the end of the day, you can't live your life that way. And a lot of the research, well, you need both. You need the external protections, but really you need to get at the heart of the matter and make sure, a lot of these school shooters have had trauma and you've got to get better mental health services, get them, get would-be school shooters hooked up with the services that they need.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
it's a deeper issue, but obviously we have to do things to protect ourselves in the meantime. But
I'm
I,
shocked at the college level by the number of my kids who have grown up, never knew anything but active shooters. In fact, many of them have been through not one, but even multiple shooting incidences. None of them, thankfully were hurt. And there is a toll that comes from that. I see it at the college level. There is an anxiety level, a worry about tests, a worry about when things pile up. My kids get way overwhelmed. You must see it at your level because I know I see it at mine. Mike?
oh, middle school is I think when that starts. Like I have a cheerleader. She's in school by 8:30. She has zero bell. She has regular class, and then she's like a cheerleader. So, and some of those basketball games are until 8. And she wants
Wow.
to join these academies. So, like, you definitely have some kids that are, especially the overachievers, that are starting to stress themselves out, and that's honestly that's my biggest worry in terms of social media is not the doom scrolling, which is an addiction in itself. It's that the depression, the
Mm-hmm.
loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are very expressive, more expressive than my generation. Yet, I think they're having a hard time having face to face, meaningful relationships. Like they are so better at expressing themselves online, keyboard warriors or keyboard,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
real relationships, dude, it's just I don't know if it's COVID, I don't know if it's the internet, but um, you still have your groups, the jocks, the emos, all that, right? But I just see a level of depression out of all the groups, especially the
Mhm.
girls. So that is a worry. But that's
Mary, how about at the high school level? Are you seeing something
Okay, I
similar?
have, I've been teaching a long time, so I've seen what the classroom looks like socially before cell phones and after cell phones. And recently our district banned cell phones. So before everybody was on their cell phones, students would, the last few minutes of class or whatever, students would talk with each other. They would interact with each other. And then when cell phones, were not really were still allowed, students would, it's just remarkable. They would all be on their phone. They wouldn't be talking to each other at the end of class. And it's really sad, now
that's
that we banned cell phones, it's students are talking to each other more again, because what are they going to do? They can't run and hide in their cell phone.
that our state did that too, and it is a game changer. Because you would constantly be fighting with kids over their phones in class, and some kids would get like, I mean, it never happened to me because I'm like, dude, I'll just call security. Don't give me your phone. But like, you have kids that are like pushing teachers, fighting teachers, getting mad at teachers for taking their phone. It's just like, what are we
Wow.
doing?
Wow.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Have either of you actually experienced violence in your schools over cell phones or anything else?
Well, I'm
Mary,
not.
go ahead, Mike. You're shaking your head. You have a story here.
Well, I'm that moron teacher that gets in the middle, right? So I've
Me
broken
too.
up. I've broken up fights. I'm not the teacher that's just like gonna sit there and watch. We just recently had a teacher get, abused by a student. So that's the first time for me.
Physical abuse by a student?
Yeah. Now,
Wow,
I mean,
middle school. Oof.
again, I wasn't there. I don't know, but I don't know any circumstances a kid should not be putting hands on a teacher. So, and it happens,
Hmm.
it happens. I've broken up fights, I've two this year, and then I've seen a teacher kind of get beat up. So that kind of, yeah, it's a
Wow.
problem.
Wow. Mary, how about you?
Well, this is many, many years ago, not recent, but I actually had to get workman's compensation as a teacher for breaking up a ninth grade girls' fight.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yes,
Girls,
I
they
got
fight constantly.
borderline carpal tunnel because I ended up being dragged along the lockers.
Oh,
You're not supposed to jump in, but my colleague was calling for help, and so you just kind of jump in without thinking.
yeah.
But yeah, but recently, nothing. So,
Wow.
I
Wow.
use
but
I usually
I have
grab them from behind and say, "Don't punch me in the face." That's usually my move.
stories.
You are listening to Mike, a middle school teacher in Virginia, and Mary, a high school teacher in New York. We're talking about all of the issues that you have heard debated, but usually not with teachers weighing in on it. Here's another topic. How about teaching to the test? Are we really teaching our kids how to think critically and to make important decisions, or are we just teaching them how to pass in New York the Regents test? I don't know what it is in Virginia.
It's
Um,
literally called the SOL,
the
standards.
S standards, okay, standards of learning. So what is it? Is it frustrating? Is it good? The pluses and minuses of teaching to the test, Mikey?
I go first.
Yeah, you go first.
I mean, obviously, it's accountability. It's all about money. Are these districts teaching their kids X amount of content? It's a necessary evil. It's a governmental evil. And for me, my first year or two, I was probably worried about that state test. But now I'm to my 11th year. Don't know what's on the test, but like after 11 years, all these released SOLs, I know what's on the test. I just don't know how it's asked. So for me, it is just like when I'm getting observed. That used to be so scary my first year or two. Dude, it doesn't stop me one bit. In fact, I have it down to a science where like I probably only need a week before the SOL to actually teach to the test. Right. And I'm not teaching to the test. I'm like, hey, we went over this. Like I'm trying to connect dots. That's how I
To
do it.
review it, to review
Yeah.
stuff.
So it's a necessary evil. I'm not like we can sit and complain all we want, but there's all in life, there's all these barriers you have to jump over. This is a barrier. I'm your coach. I'm gonna get you over there. Don't even worry. Right. Until we get to that last week. And then it's like boot camp for a week. And dude, I get 85 to 90% pass rates, which is, for 100 plus kids.
Not bad. Okay, Mary, how about you? You've been doing this longer. You've dealt with
Yeah,
regents and all this.
I have mixed feelings, a lot of mixed feelings. So, like, I graduated of the 5 high schools I went to, I graduated from high school in Colorado that did not have regents, right? And the thing was, I took AP courses, but I was really interested in American history. So I was able to graduate without taking any course in global history. And I think that's not good, right? So I like the New York State Regents in that it does require students to have some history in the rest of the world. But I think that if it would be better if at the Regents, the global and the US, well, the global teachers, if they were able to just focus on more, not just try to cover so much, but like just do a whole thing on ancient Mesopotamia, do an in-depth thing, then cover the Middle Ages by doing something in-depth there. Because the way that the Regents has ended up for the last several years, and I've graded umpteen million Regents, is it just gets so shallow.
Right.
And students also are just, especially special needs students, are just punished, because they can't cope with all of these, facts. So I really think, I have mixed feelings. And, I give tests. I think that's part of education, but I have the luxury of designing my own tests. And the problem with the Regents too is you never know what you're going to get. I mean, it's just like ridiculous. If I'm giving a test, I teach the material that is going to be on my test. I think that's only fair.
Of course.
But this whole Regents thing in that terms, it doesn't make any sense to me.
And New York is, of course, changing the rules on Regents. It may be now one of several means of evaluating students. We are running out of time. I could go into depth on all of this. It's so frustrating. But another topic I want to bring up with both of you is you're both public school teachers. Are public schools in danger? It used to be the glory of America. Anybody could go to school and get a great education for free. And now we seem to be bifurcating. There are private schools, there are charter schools. There are vouchers that allow people to use tax money and go to schools that are not public schools. Is this a danger to you, and is that a danger to democracy? There's a big question. Mary, you first.
I think it depends really where you live.
100%.
I think a larger problem is demographics. Okay. Teaching in a more rural district, rural schools are really feeling the impact of declining, just people aren't having kids, right?
Right.
So that is a big concern. My home district where my kids went, Bethlehem, I mean, we are probably getting too many people here, huge class sizes and whatnot. So it depends. I mean, they're great, going back in history, my parents actually put my younger sisters in Albany Academy and then pulled them to put them in Bethlehem public schools.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that's interesting.
We're
seeing this at the college level. The humanities are suffering horribly because kids are going into like Homeland Security and computers. And so all of humanities are suffering. Our enrollment is down. You're right, it's demographics. Mike, though, you're in the South, you're in Virginia, a little different situation there.
This is the thing, like the school system. You're talking, I don't even know how many tens of thousands of schools in 50 states and how many districts. Like, I think the school system, American school system, is a reflection of American society. If you live in a nice neighborhood, you're going to have the nicest schools, the best facilities. The best teachers are going to want to teach there. And the poorer you get, or the more countryside you get, the less resources you're going to have, the less quality teachers you're going to have. It's just a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't think education is that much different than it used to be in terms of that. I think there's just a bigger spotlight on it because everyone's talking to each other now. Like, so again, you got kids that are like, oh, teachers don't get paid that much. Well, it's like, well, what state? Right? Because in Arizona, they might only be getting 30,000. In California, they might be making 120,000. It's just like, again, our nicest, because I live by the beach, so our nicest schools are by the beach, right? I don't work at the beach school. I work at the school I went to, which is one of the oldest. And again, you have a mix of people that are, they're driving in with Benzes, and then you got kids taking taxis because they're living in a hotel. So like I think the school system is just a reflection of the American society in general. And again, I've heard a great quote. I'm going to paraphrase, but the number one thing rich families leave their kids is nice neighborhoods. Because what do
Mhm.
they have? They have the nice schools. Or if you're rich, you just go do private. So just to take it back to your question, this idea of school choice, it sounds great, especially if you're in a crap district and you don't think your kid's getting that quality education that you want. The problem though is that it's just you're so able to abuse that. So you can take money, taxpayer money out of the school systems and pay for private institutions.
Mhm.
And that just seems like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Right, and the
And
Supreme
why
Court could soon make that religious schools too. We're
and my
about to
state
hear.
and that's
Yeah.
how my governor got like that was his platform and that's how he got elected and
Yeah.
this is what parents care about and it is a big concern for me because okay, this district's not doing well, let's take money away from it and all the quality kids that they have and teachers probably too, take them out of there, put them somewhere else. Well,
What are you
what the
left
heck,
with?
at
Yeah.
school you just took everything out of, right? It
Mary,
doesn't.
let's switch. We are running out of time, as I keep saying. I have one last question for
Yeah.
both of you. If you were put into power, and you can go back, double back, Mary, if you want to, but if you were put into power and you could make one reform to the district where you are, what would it be? So, Mary, go ahead, take it. I think you want to
Well,
refer back.
I'll say going back to that question, my dream would be how the Swiss handle things. The Swiss say nobody, no person, no family should fall below a certain level. And I think we should have that attitude in the United States, that no school should fall below a certain level. I mean, every kid, it's part of our democracy. Every kid should have a decent chance at education. And, there's like just going to a private school, by the way, doesn't mean you get a good education. There are
True.
there are issues
Better discipline
too
though.
with kids that go to private
Mhm.
school. Okay. I am very happy that my kids went to public school. I think they're very well balanced. And and so on and so forth. So I mean, for some, private schools are great, but it's not, I don't like it when people just automatically assume somehow private schools are better. And some of these parochial schools are really struggling financially, and they really are not better than public
Mhm.
schools.
All right. So one change you could make. You have
Me?
power over it. No, Mary first, and then
Oh,
Mike. One
one
change
change I
you
could
could
make
make.
is how education is funded, because that's the
That's a
whole
good
thing,
one.
right?
Yes.
I mean, people were talking about don't have $1 on your income tax and throw it into a big piggy bank. I mean, it's funding. It is funding. It's not
Money.
just funding. You can have I don't know, a well-funded classroom. If the teacher doesn't care and the students don't care, that's not going to be a good class. But you do need reasonable funding to attract teachers, because teachers have to make a living too. They got to support their families. But also just basic facilities and things like that.
So
You
money.
don't
You'd give more
need,
money.
yeah, but
Okay.
not, I mean, I don't know, not gobs of money, but you need enough, right?
And equitably distribute it.
Right.
Okay. And Mike, how about you? You get one reform. What would it be?
I just get one, huh?
Yep, that's it.
Well, I think my biggest issue, and again, it's hard to relate American school systems to other countries because we're so big, but like Finland, you get in between classes. First off, it's like an hour class. So it's like precise. And then the kids get like 15 minutes where they can hang out. They can throw around football. They can get that text message out of the way. Then you come to class. So it's like dude, why do we have to be in school 8 hours? Like we're babysitting for a chunk of those times, right? And then on top of that, it's like these kids were herding them in one after another, and they're just not focused. We're not allowing them to have that social aspect to school. So it's like I got kids that are coming in and they're like trying to get the gossip. It's like, dude, they should have had 10, 15 minutes before class to talk about that. Right.
Good point.
So
Good point.
it will never change because you're messing with parents' time. Like if they're not in school, then the kids are at home, and then
The parents have right.
So,
and I never wanted to homeschool. God forbid.
Oh, trust me, nobody does. But so like, and I noticed that with COVID, it's like, dude, if why are we in school for 8 hours? Like, dude, I'm teaching these kids like very precise.
Right,
And
right.
then go live life, go play, go do stuff. So
Yeah,
just
I would
limit
tell
the
students to go outside.
Yeah,
limit the
yeah,
amount.
just
Yeah,
go have recess.
tell that to
Yeah.
Gemma every day, you know? So it's
This
just like, go
This
ahead.
has been an amazing conversation. We're talking to Mike, a middle school teacher in Virginia. I happen to know him well. He's a son. And to Mary, who is a teacher in upstate New York in high school level. I so appreciate your time. I'm going to invite you both back in because school issues do not go away. Maybe when they eliminate the Department of Education, I've heard talk of that. Maybe we'll have you back on that. In the meantime, we end our programs with a toast. And this is an easy one tonight. It's a toast to the teachers of America who work so hard, so hard. Even if you do have summer vacations off, you deserve it and you need it. They work so hard and they deal with the most precious of our possessions and commodities, our children. And you're the hope of the future. And I just have such respect for you. I'm a teacher myself, but it's so much different at the college level. I spent some time in Mike's classroom a few years ago. You may remember Mike. And I came away saying, oh my God, I'm so tired. And I was just sitting there watching you. You deserve all of our credit and our support. And I'm sorry you don't get it often enough. So thank you.